The Prince of Paxony, Chapter 9. The Elven Army Marches. The gusting wind raised clouds of dust, which at ground level would have been choking. In the upper branches of an old oak tree, the huge black bird-like shape merely ignored it and concentrated instead upon the sight of the elven army emerging from the mountain pass. Like a gigantic snake, the elven army wound its way down the mountain. From his position near its head, Aaron could look back and marvel at the sight. For mile after mile, the thin column could be seen, sometimes disappearing as the curve of the mountain hid it from view, and then reappearing again as the low clouds swallowed up the tail. Chariots and supply wagons made black mounds in the otherwise uniform trail. Camp was struck that evening at the foot of the pass, but it was several hours before the last of the elven army arrived down into the plain. Aaron was already asleep by that time, but King Rowan prowled the encampment until late into the night, checking on his elves. The Princess Elflise had remained behind in the Golden City. A long trip to the Greylands would soon deplete her powers, and this could not be allowed. Smudge, too, was unable to accompany the elven war machine. He departed for the island of Equinil to report back to the Unicorn King of what had happened. At least, thought King Rowan, he would not have to worry about their safety on this dangerous mission. He stopped as he approached the border of the camp and joked with the sentries, while taking careful note of the positioning of them. He couldn't find any fault with the layout of the camp. Everything was a model of military precision, and all was in its correct place. Walking back to his tent under the twinkling stars, he looked up for a moment at the clouds. They were scudding across the full moon. And he thought about the boy. No, he reminded himself, not the boy, the prince. At my age, anybody under the age of 100 years old seems like a boy, thought the king. But he looks to be a promising lad. Strong, intelligent, talented with the sword. And he seems to have patience. The king smiled to himself at a sudden thought. He'll need that if he's to be the husband of my daughter. Above him, a large bat momentarily blotted out the light of the moon, circling once before heading west. The foul stench of sulphur had started to dissipate as the imp reported back to Scarba the news of the elven army. Her rage at the news of the elven army was awful. Even the lizard Schlim cowered deep in her pocket. She stormed about the room, sweeping tables clear of lamps and trinkets, just snarling. Too soon, it's too soon, she howled. The imp waited its chance before leaping out the window, growing black wings even as he jumped. After many terrible minutes, Scarba suddenly stopped her tirade, and a terrible calmness cleared her angry face. Reaching into her pocket, she produced the lizard and raised it up so that its eyes were looking into hers. The boy has returned, Slim, with elves. Yes, with elves. your favourite food. The lizard's dead eyes stared unblinkingly back and down at her wry mouth. Well, your second favourite then, added Scarver, with an evil smile. She started for the door. This has always been your first, hasn't it, my dear? She leaned forward and opened her mouth wide as a lightning-fast tongue flicked out of the lizard's mouth and entered hers. Yellow-black smoke engulfed the pair as they made their way out onto the battlements of the castle. Below, a crowd of castle workers stopped what they were doing and stared up at the astonishing sight unfolding before their eyes. Silhouetted up against the sky was Scarber, with arms outstretched, holding a black shape. It was the lizard, and it was growing. And growing and changing as it grew. Bigger and bigger, metamorphosing into a dragon. The workers ran screaming in all directions as pieces of the brickwork battlements between the dragon's feet crumbled under the sudden weight and crashed down into the courtyard, adding to the confusion. Above them, the monstrous beast lowered its head as Scarber climbed laughingly astride its scaly neck. With a voice far too loud to be that of any ordinary human, Scarber cried out, "So, people of Paxony, your little prince has returned to the kingdom with some friends. He's on his way here. Tell him when he arrives that Scarber will return soon, with some little friends of my own." She finished her echoing message with a demonic laugh, blending with the sound of the dragon's wings as it flapped ungainly up into the morning sky. Higher and higher it went, until the huge shape became first a dot and then vanished. A small black stain on the vast dome of the sky was all that remained. It was 2 days later that Aaron and King Rowan rode into the castle grounds. When a messenger had arrived from the castle bringing news of Scarber's departure, they had mounted up straight away and ridden ahead of the army's main force, with only a small party of physicians accompanying them. When the messenger had first arrived, King Rowan was at first mindful of a trap, but Aaron knew this could be no betrayal when he saw that the messenger was none other than his father's personal servant, Slipper. They greeted each other like long-lost brothers. Indeed, Slipper was one of the closest things to a brother that Aaron could have known. They'd grown up together in the castle grounds, both aware of the difference in their stations, but both ignoring it for much of the time. As soon as the castle was reached, the first place they visited was Aaron's father's bedchamber. The old man lay there on the ancient four-posted bed, weak and shrivelled, a mere shadow of the giant he'd once been. He was unable to recognise Aaron and unable even to talk. It was though he was awake and yet asleep at the same time. Slipper was able to tell the young prince and the elven king what had happened. Scarber had not allowed anyone to visit your father. We had no idea he was in this condition. I fear for his life. King Rowan called for his personal physicians, who hustled the others out of the room and began to examine the sick man in great detail. The head of the elven doctors emerged after an hour with a very serious expression. It is much as we feared. Your father has been enchanted and remains under a strong spell. The witch has left him at death's door, and there is little that we can do for him here. He must be taken immediately back to our elf lands, where we can mix magic with medicine. Aaron protested that his father looked far too ill to travel. The doctor agreed with him, but added the point that if he stayed here, then there will be little help for him. Aaron sobbed over his father's bed as the arrangements were made. There was no time to waste. A chariot was quickly converted to take a bed. The sick king and the elvish doctors rode away within the hour, heading back down the road towards the mountains. Aaron stood on the battlements and, with a tear in his eye, watched for a while as the little party disappeared into the distance. His thoughts were interrupted by King Rowan, who, putting his arms around the prince's shoulders, led him down into the courtyard, where Slipper waited. As Aaron came down, he noticed that every eye was on him. From the cook's boy to the master blacksmith, the entire castle staff, and half the village too, it seemed, were watching him in expectation. "You must speak to them, Aaron," said King Rowan. "They need reassurance." Aaron nodded and addressed the crowd in the Paxon language. "People of Paxony," started Aaron. "My people, my father, our king, has been enchanted by the evil witch Scarba. This elf with me is King Rowan, the king of the elves. He has joined forces with me to rid our land of the witch and to try to lift the spell from my father. We've sent him back to the land of the elves to see if the spell can be lifted. Until he returns, I am in charge here. Let it be known throughout the land that all elves that enter Paxony are to be treated as our honoured guests, and that we are at war with the witch Scarba." Aaron looked out at the assembled crowd with an eagle eye. "My first task is to raise an army from the people of Paxony. I want nobody but volunteers to enlist, as Scarba is sure to return with forces of her own. Now, who will join me?" Every single person present in the courtyard roared in agreement and surged forward, waving their hats in the air. Even the palace dogs were caught up in the excitement. They leapt up at the crowd, barking their heads off. "It looks as though you have the people's support, Aaron," the elven king shouted over the din.